In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to install the necessary software for preparing your lab test. You have to notice that all the software has been set up properly in your prison computers and also in the virtual image that we gave to you in the beginning of the course. So if you plan to prepare your lab test in either your prison account or to actually use it or to run it on your virtual image, you don't actually have to follow this video. You can just go to the next one. However, if you plan to use your own PC, Mac, or your Linux machine, then you have to follow this video to set up the software properly. Okay? So all the steps are documented in our course website. So go to the course website for summer 2015 and then go to tests exam, and there is a section called lab test preparation. So we have two steps to follow for this video, and overall we are going to set up a framework called ETF, standing for Eiffel Testing Framework, and essentially we are going to download some generator which will be able to generate projects that contains the ETF. Okay, that's a big picture, but you don't actually have to know about the details for the purpose of this video. We'll talk about the framework in much greater details in later lecture. And then after we have installed all the software, we want to make sure it actually can work on your local machines. So we actually try to generate example projects and try to compile that and make sure everything works fine. That's the goal for this current video. So let's follow the steps carefully. The first step is to create a new directory called ETF somewhere in your file system, which will store all the dependent libraries of all the generated ETF projects. And also we have to download the executable for the ETF generator. And also we have to download some example files for you to start generating ETF projects. That's what we will do. So now, first of all, create a new directory called ETF. So for example, in my computer, I will create under my desktop. So I would say ETF here. And then if I click on that, I can see that's empty, which is expected. Next step. So download this library here called Math Models. Okay. So if you click on this link here, it's going to show you, it might prompt you for your normal credential for downloading files for this course. You should know how to do that. Okay, so we're going to download a file called mathmodels.zip. Say save file, and then make sure you go to the right path. For example, in my case, it's going to be under my home directory, desktop, and ETF, the empty directory we just created. Okay, put it there, save, and now next step is to unzip that zip file in your ETF directory. Go there and then double click. In my case, on Mac, you can simply just double click to unzip the file. I believe you can do that on Windows, but for Linux, you may have to run some unzip command to unzip it. Depends. Okay, double click to unzip it. So now you actually have the normal directory called Math Models as a single word. You don't actually have to worry about the contents here. We'll talk about the Math Models later in the course. Okay, make sure you have the zip. You also have the uncompressed directory. Next, we're actually going to create a new environment variable called Math Models, all uppercases, all capitals. And then we're going to let this new environment variable point to the path of where you store the math models directory. In my case, it will be under my home directory /desktop/ETF/math models. Okay, that's what we will do. On the Mac and Linux, you will actually have to modify your bash profile. Well, I'll show you how to do that on Mac, and also I will show and how to do that on Linux will be very similar. And then I'll also briefly show you how you can do that on Windows. Okay, first of all, let's go to your bash profile. On Mac, you should have this Nano editor available, but you don't really have to use Nano. You can use any text editor you like. Okay, this will be the path. So tilde stands for your home directory, and dot bash profile. Okay, if I go there, okay, so now I'm actually going to, I already have the line, but I'll show you how you can type it. What you have to do is to say export. Okay, so basically just add a new line to your bash profile file and say export. Okay, export, and then space math models, make sure they are all capitals, equals, and then the path to your math models. In my case, it would be my it will be users Jackie, my home directory, desktop, ETF, and then math models. Okay, once you're done, if you're using Nano, it will say Control X. It will prompt you to save your file. Type Y for yes, and enter to confirm. Okay. Once you have done this, you actually have to refresh your system to use the new version of the bash profile. So you would say source and give the path to the bash profile. If you do that, so now you can actually just make sure you can say echo, and now we should have a math models environment variable there, and make sure it's pointing to the right path. Okay, make sure you have done this step properly. On the other hand, if you want to do the same thing on Windows, so let's say if I have Windows, you have to go to Control Panel, and then let's say you can just type to search to see edit system environments variable. If you go there, of course, you have to make sure you have the admin privilege, and then you can now under system properties, you can go to environments variables. What you have to do is to go under system variables, and I already have that, so you have to, for example, say new, and here you have to create a new variable, just say math models. Okay, all capitals, and now you have to give the path to where you actually unzip the math models.zip file that you just downloaded. Okay, I wouldn't include this step because I got it already on my Windows machine, but make sure you do the same on your PC. Okay, that's how you do that on Windows. Okay, so now we have completed this step. So now we have to download the executable for the ETF generator. So now we have to go to this link here. So I can right click and say opening a new tab. So we still keep the current tab here. Okay, so now you can see that on this page, we have 3 possible executables for you to download depending on which operating system you're using. You can download for Linux, you can download for Mac, you can also download for Windows 64 bits. So let's say in my case, well, I want to download for Mac. The name here all end with .exe, but you can feel free to actually rename it to maybe just ETF without the dash mac.exe, for example. Just can rename that to ETF. I'll show you how to do that. And also, if you're using a Linux and Mac, once you have downloaded the executable, you have to rename it, and also to make sure you change the permission. Make sure that's executable. I will show you how to do that. Okay, so now if we want to download this, we'll actually click on that for Mac and say save file. So now we are under ETF. So what I would suggest is you can just create a new directory here, just called exe. Okay, so this will be storing your exe file. So what you can do is you don't have to keep this name. You can just say ETF. That's what you can do. Okay, if you do that, and let's go back to our ETF directory. So now you can see you do have the ETF here. Okay, so now let's go back to your terminal. Let's go to my desktop, ETF, and exe. So now if you try to see the permission there, you can see now ETF only have the read permission for the owner, for the group, and for the user. Okay, what we have to make sure is it has the mode for execution. So what you have to do is to say go to so what you have to do is to say change mode. Okay, and then 755 will be the one to do, and now we can say ETF. Okay, if you do that, so now you can see that we have the ETF in the current directory. So what you can do is simply just type ETF to make sure it's now executable. If you type it, that's good. So that means you are not launching ETF in the right way, but that's okay. But at least you can now see you can correctly execute in the ETF generator and actually just give you some error messages. Okay, and just to show you, if you want to see how to use the ETF, you have to say ETF dash help, and it's actually going to print to you some short manual about how you can use the ETF with different modes. We'll cover how to use the different modes later in the tutorial, but for now, we can just live with that. Okay, so far we have correctly set up the ETF generator, and what we have to do, let me go back there. So we have completed this step here, but now we actually want to make sure ETF is actually added into our system path so that every time when we want to run the ETF, we don't actually have to go to that directory or to actually specify its entire path. Okay, we want to make sure it's always automatically searched through by the system. So what we have to do is to make sure we add this executable path into your system path. Okay, how do we do that? So now on the Mac, so let me again go to our bash profile, and then what you have to do is to make sure you actually change your path variable, okay, path equals, and now we're actually going to add, as you can see that on the Mac, I believe on Linux as well, each part of the path environment variable is separated by colon. And in the case of Windows, it's actually separated by semicolon. Okay, there's a small detail you have to pay attention to if you're also using PC. So make sure you actually append colon dollar path at the end. Okay, and then you're going to add this part here to actually add, for example, users, my home directory, desktop, ETF, and exe. So this makes sure every time if you type some command, so the command will be searched through by the path that's defined in the path environments variable. Okay, that's just a basic knowledge about using Unix-like operating system. Okay, make sure you have the colon before and after this part, this new part you're going to add to your path, and then once you're done, save it. Control X and Y for confirm the save, and enter to confirm again. Okay, so now once you're done with that, you have to say source bash profile, and then you're going to make sure you really have the ETF command in there. So you do. So now if you say which ETF, that actually tells you that every time if you simply type ETF, so for example, I'm actually currently in the exe directory, of course it's there. But now, for example, if I just change to my home directory, but now if I say ETF, I'm actually not in that exe directory anymore. So if I say ETF, so it correctly tells me that this is really launching the ETF executable that's stored in the exe directory. Okay, that's why setting up the path in your bash profile is crucial. Okay, make sure you have completed this step correctly. On Windows, what you have to do in a similar fashion is to again go to your control panel, and then here we can search for environments variable, edit that, and again you may have to prompt you for your admin password, environments variable. So what you have to do is go to the path. Okay, under system variables, go to path, and you have to say edits. Okay, so now you can see that presumably you might have some parts already. What you have to do is to make sure you can see that all the parts of the path is separated by semicolon. Okay, and now you just have to add a new parts at the end. So for example, you can actually simply just type semicolon here and then the path to the exe directory. Okay, just exactly the same way that we set up in the Mac or Linux. Okay, I'm not going to save it, but you can do it by yourself. Okay, once you're done with that, you can also run it on Windows in the same way. Okay, so now we are done with step one. So now it's easy because now ETF is now actually in your system path. So you can just run the command ETF to start generating your projects. And also your projects should be compilable because you also downloaded and set up your math models. Okay, you downloaded math models and also you create a new environment variable, which is called math models to properly point to it. Okay, now step two, we're actually going to generate and compile your first ETF projects, but now we need some example files for you to use. First of all, we want to create a new project directory. Let's call it ETFs underscore bank under your 3311 workspace. Okay, so we can simply just go to, let me clear that. So for example, you can go to your home directory and 3311, that's where we store all our projects in the previous tutorial series. Okay, so now we can say make directory ETF bank. Okay, and now we can go in there, currently just empty. However, now we're going to we're going to download 3 files. Okay, this file is actually the just make the long story short. We'll talk about more in later tutorial videos. We're going to download 3 files. The first file is called definitions.txt. So this file is going to provide the information for the ETF generator to generate some skeleton projects for you. That's why it's called definitions. Okay, we'll show you briefly the contents of that. And then, so these 2 files, input and input bad.txt, is actually after you have generated your ETF projects, you can already try to execute some inputs and generate some outputs. Okay, so just make sure this definitions.txt is to enable you to generate the ETF projects to begin with. And once you actually have compiled your projects, you can execute your projects on either input.txt, generate some outputs, or you can execute your ETF projects on input bad.txt and generate some error outputs basically. Okay, so we're going to do that, but let's download these 3 files first. So again, we're actually going to go there. So right click and say open a new tab, open the link on the new tab. So now we're going to download definitions.txt, input bad.txt, and also input.txt. Okay, so you can right click, save link as, for example. And now we are going to home directory 3311, and also we have ETF bank. Okay, just put it there. Definitions.txt, and also we're going to download input.txt, save link as, okay, in ETF bank. Do that, and also etf-bad.txt. Okay, so we have downloaded all the 3 files. Let's go back. So now you can see that we have definitions.txt. So make sure currently we are in our home directory 3311 workspace and ETF bank directory project directory. So we have definitions, we have the 2 input files there. Okay, so now you have to type some command to actually generate your first ETF projects. Okay, first of all, we want to make sure our current directory is actually the ETF bank. Let's make sure that's the case. So that's good. So because you can use pwd to make sure the current directory is really the ETF bank project directory there. And now we want to run the following command. You can see that because we have set up the path to search through for the ETF executable, and we're going to invoke ETF with this particular flag or options. It's called -new, which means we're going to generate a brand new ETF project. And to generate that, we need some information like some configuration information to begin with. Let's see just briefly how definitions.txt look like. So if we go back to our ETF projects, 311, it's ETF bank. So if you look at definitions of text, so basically we are trying to generate a system called bank. And we actually have some type definitions here. We'll go over that later in the tutorial, in other tutorial video. So these are the type definitions. And so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 events that actually define the projects. Okay, we have because we are dealing with a bank projects, so we have a way to generate new account to actually create new accounts. We have a way to deposit into some accounts, and we have a way to withdraw from some account, and we also have a way to transfer from one account to another. Okay, and also you can see that we also have a way to specify the types of the parameters. Okay, we'll actually go over this in detail in later tutorial video, but for this one, we don't have to worry about them. Okay, close. Okay, so now we're going to specify this, and now this is important. Here, this is dot. That means the current directory, which is the ETF bank, will be target directory for storing all the generated files. Okay, that's important, so don't miss this dot here. Okay, so you just have to type the command yourself. I'm going to type it now. Okay, current directory is correct. So now I'm going to say ETF dash new, and then definitions.txt and dot. Okay, enter. So you can see that a list of files has been generated in your current directory. So now you can actually open your current directory. You can see that. So 1, 2, and 3. So these 3 files were the ones we downloaded from the web. And the others are actually automatically generated by the ETF generator, the executable. Okay, so you don't have to worry about them for now. Let's so make sure you can actually have those files generated. That's the crucial thing. And once this is done, so now we are going to run our last command to make sure the generated projects is already compilable. Okay, you're actually going to, well, instead of actually launch, well, there are 2 ways to compile the code, to compile the projects. So far, you only learned how to actually compile your projects by launching Eiffel Studio and choose the ECF file. But I'm going to show you another way. This, in some way, that's more convenient. You don't actually have to launch the Eiffel Studio. What you can do is you can actually type EC1501. So this should already be in your path when you actually first install Eiffel Studio. Okay, you have to type EC1501. Okay, and then you have to type these options here to say now we're going to finalize the projects and compile the C code, and we're going to configure using this generated ETF file, ECF file. Okay, one thing I can show you is you can see that bank.ecf is actually, so there's a typo here, so it should simply just be bank.ecf that you have to type. Okay, so bank.ecf, you have to compile from there. Let me show you. So now you can see that, so this is where we put the generated files, and you can see that we do have bank.ecf for us to compile. So EC1501 minus C compile minus finalize, and then minus config, and now we can do bank.ecf. Okay, and now you can hit enter. And once we can make sure everything can be compiled and your projects can be built, then we are done for this video. Let's just wait and see everything goes fine. Okay, and meanwhile, I just want to recap what we have done so far. So we have completed 2 steps to actually set up the ETF generation framework for your PC or for your Mac or for your Linux machine. So we have actually installed the ETF executable, and we have installed the dependent libraries called math models, and we actually have added the math models and also the ETF executable into your bash profile to make sure you can actually launch them properly. And also, we also try to use the ETF executable to actually generate your first projects for the bank from the definitions.txt file by launching ETF using the dash new option, and then we actually use the Eiffel compiler from the command line to finalize your code. Okay. Okay, it is now generating the C code. So basically, we're just doing the normal stuff from the command line rather than from Eiffel Studio. So nothing new to you really. Let's just wait a bit longer. It's getting to complete. Okay, as long as eventually you see some indication of success from the compilation, then that means everything has been set up correctly. And make sure you actually set this up correctly before you go on to the next video. Okay, you can see that it says C compilation completed. Okay, so that means everything is fine. One more thing I want to draw your attention to, since now we're in the command line, so now you can see that the new thing after the compilation was we actually have an ifgens directory, which we briefly mentioned in the previous tutorial videos but never went into details. Okay, one thing I would like to bring your attention to is since we have just finalized our code, that means some executable for your current bank projects has been stored somewhere in your ifgen directory. Okay, so what you have to do is to, again, let's open the current directory, and you can see that we have ifgens. Go into ifgens. ifgens actually has a bank directory because bank is the name of the project. And then under the bank, because we have finalized our project, so there's something called F that underscore code, F standing for final. If you go there, you will see that this is some executable that's generated from the compilation process. So later on, if you want to launch your projects to actually execute your project from the command line, this is the file you have to type. Okay, so one final thing to show you is the way to do that is to say ifgens, okay, because we are currently in the ETF bank directory ifgens, and then bank F code, and then we'd say bank. Okay, so just try to do that. And okay, actually, it's by default it's going to pop up some GUI for you. So if you can see this GUI, that means you have successfully built up your projects. And we actually talk about how to use this GUI and how you can switch between different modes for your generated ETF projects. Okay, as long as you can see this GUI, that means you have successfully completed this video tutorial. Okay, stay watching.